Okay, what I'm trying to do in this video is the Carnegie building. We're going to do the first question of assignment 1. Just by way of introduction, the old Russellville Revitalization Corporation, ORCO, is trying to revitalize the Main Street and Old Russellville neighborhood. The long vacant Carnegie building is a major impediment to their efforts. The building is owned by a notorious local speculator who has held the building for 10 years, kept it vacant, and refused to make improvements. If you notice in this picture, I put Mr. Potter from It's a Wonderful Life, classic film. Everyone should enjoy it. He has generously agreed to sell it to Orco for $100,000, divided $50,000 for the land and $50,000 for the building. The Carnegie building has 1,200 square feet of retail space on the first floor and 18 one-bedroom apartments on each of the upper 2 floors. So that's a total of 36 units. A contractor has estimated rehabilitation costs at $70 per square foot of retail space and $140 per square foot of residential space. All 3 floors are at 1,200 square feet each. The professional fees, taxes, insurance, and permits are estimated at 10% of construction costs. Orco intends to earn a $500,000 developer fee for completing the project. Orco can rent each apartment for $625 per month. The retail will lease for $6 per square foot annually, and expenses will run $1,200,000 annually. Orco expects a 20% vacancy rate of the apartments and a 33.33% vacancy rate on the commercial space in the first year. Very important to recognize the difference between first year and the stabilized rent. The stabilized vacancy rate should be 7.0% of the apartments and 10% on the commercial space. Russellville Savings has offered to provide both construction and permanent financing for the project so long as the DCR is at least 1.25 and the loan-to-value ratio is no more than 75%. The permanent loan will be at 7.5% with a 15-year term and a 30-year amortization schedule. The MIA appraisal has proposed a cap rate or capitalization rate of 0.08 for the project. All right, so assignment 1, let's dive into it. Orco has come to you for help in putting this deal together. Please answer the following questions. Question 1, how much will Russellville Savings loan on this project? What is the DCR, loan-to-value ratio, and break-even point? All right, so we have 4 different parts to this problem. Figuring out first how much they're willing to loan, and then the DCR is going to be the second part, loan-to-value the third part, and break-even point. So we're going to break these down, each part. First off, the Russellville Savings loan will be willing to loan the lesser of either 1, the loan-to-value test, or 2, the debt coverage ratio test. So that way we need to determine both and then pick the lesser of the 2. And just as a reminder, the loan-to-value test is the amount of the loan equals fair market value times loan-to-value. So that's the equation for you right there. The DCR test is the amount of the loan equals debt service divided by the constant. All right, so we're going to start by filling out the sheet that you have, your pre-tax analysis sheet. This again should be familiar for you. It should be going a little bit faster. The gross residential rent equals the rent per month times 12 months to make it a year times the number of units. So we have $625 per month times 12 months times 20 units, and we get $270,000. So we plug that in there to the top of our sheet. Next, we go to gross commercial rent. This time we're actually filling in because we've been given some commercial numbers. This is different than before because we don't have to times it by 12 months because it's already given to us annually. So it's the rent per square foot times square feet. So here we have $6 per square foot times 1,200 square feet for a total of $72,000. So we put the gross commercial rent right there, $72,000. We have no other contributions or other income, so we leave those ones blank. So now the gross income is when you add them together, the gross residential rent plus the other one, the gross commercial rent. So we have our $270,000 plus our $72,000 for a total of $342,000. So we plug that number into our gross income. Now this is where we get a little bit different. You're not filling out the whole first year. Instead, you're going to the right-hand side of the sheet. You're coming over here to stabilized NOI. So we're not using the first year numbers, we're using the stabilized numbers. Why? Because the loan is going to be based off the stabilized numbers, not the first year numbers. So all these numbers should flow over. Your gross residential rent, your gross commercial rent, your gross income, those can all be kind of applied over here to the right-hand side of the stabilized NOI. Now, we're going to try and figure out the vacancy residential and the vacancy commercial next. Now, you use your to get your stabilized NOI, you take your year one gross income minus your stabilized vacancy minus your year one expenses. So first we got to do all the stabilized vacancy includes both the residential and the commercial. So we're given in the facts that 7% is going to be the stabilized vacancy rate. So 7% of 270,000 is $18,900. So we're taking this number, $270,000, times it by 7% of our stabilized vacancy residential rate, and then we're plugging that number in right here because we're going to be minusing it later, but we're plugging that 18,900 right here. Same thing for the commercial. We take this number, the $72,000, times it by 10% to get $7,200, and we plug it in there. So our effective gross rent, or our EGR, is our gross income minus the stabilized vacancy residential and the stabilized commercial. So we have our $342,000 minus the $18,900 minus the $7,200. We get a total of $315,900. That's our effective gross rent. Moving down, remember, stabilized NOI equals the year one gross income minus the stabilized vacancy, both residential and commercial, minus the year one expenses. The factor gives us operating expenses of $120,000. So we take our EGR, our $315,900, minus our operating expenses of $120,000, and we equal $195,900. That is our stabilized NOI. That's going to be a very important number moving on. So we plug that in right there, $195,900. And so now that we have that number, the stabilized NOI, this will plug in and help us figure out the loan-to-value ratio. And remember, loan-to-value ratio is the amount of the loan equals the fair market value times the loan-to-value. Now, we're given the loan-to-value earlier, 75% in the facts of the case. However, we still have to figure out our fair market value to get our amount of the loan. And we can calculate fair market value with the SNOI, which is the stabilized net operating income, and the market rate, RO. The fair market value equals SNOI divided by the capitalization rate. So we know from a few slides before, our stabilized NOI is $195,900 right there, and we know our capitalization rate, 0.08, is coming from the facts. So if you go back up to the facts of the case, our capitalization rate is 0.08. That's where it comes from. So you take your SNOI divided by your 0.08, and you get a fair market value of $2,448,750. So that is our fair market value number. So now we can plug that back in, and we can get our amount of our loan. Amount of the loan equals fair market value times the loan to value. $2,448,750 times 75% comes up with $1,836,563. This is the amount of the loan based off the loan to value test. Okay, so that's just one part of it. Now we need to use the debt coverage ratio test. Now remember, debt coverage ratio is the maximum debt service equals stabilized net operating income, SNOI, divided by the debt coverage ratio. So once again, we're using this SNOI to figure this out. So we know that SNOI, the stabilized net operating income, is $195,900, and our debt coverage ratio is 1.25, again, coming from the facts of the case. I'm going to go up just to show it again. The DCR is at least 1.25, so we're using that number based off the facts and plugging it in here. So you take $195,900 divided by 1.25, and we get $156,720. So that means our maximum debt service is $156,720. Now, the amount of the loan under the DCR test is maximum debt service divided by the constant. Here we have $156,720, and we know that our constant, you can use your percentages. If you go back up and look at the rate that they gave you, 75% with a 15-year term and 30-year amortization schedule. Use your chart, pages 89, 90, 91 back there to get your constant, which is going to be 0.084. So you take your debt service, divide it by the constant, and you come up with $1,865,714. That's going to be the amount of the loan based off the debt coverage ratio. So now they're pretty close, and now let's compare them. The LTV amount was 1.836563, whereas the amount under the DCR loan was 1.865714. Now remember, the Russell Savings Loan will be willing to loan the lesser. Thus, the Russell Savings will be willing to loan the 1.836563. That is the amount loan under the LTV. So that's where we know what we're going to be using going forward. That is the amount that the bank is willing to loan. Now, to the second part of the question, what is the DCR, loan to value ratio, and break-even point? Okay, to determine DCR, we need to calculate the debt service at the current loan amount. Now, you might be saying, wait a minute, we've already got the DCR. It's in the fact pattern of the case, 1.25. See, DCR is at least 1.25. Now, that would be true if we were going under the DCR test. But since we went under the loan to value test, right here, we went under the loan to value test, we know that it's going to be at least 1.25 and it could be higher. So we need to calculate it using the debt service at the current loan amount, that is at this 1.836. So remember, debt service equals loan amount times constant. So we take our new loan amount, we plug it in here, take our constant, the 0.084, and we come up with our debt service of 154,271. Now, we take that debt coverage ratio, remember, equals the NOI divided by the debt service. Our debt coverage ratio is NOI divided by debt service. So we plug our other number that we remember, 195,900. We divide it by our new debt service of 154,271, and we equal 1.27. So our actual debt coverage ratio is going to be 1.27. That's the answer for debt coverage ratio, is 1.27, a little bit higher. Now, loan to value ratio is 75%. This one should be pretty easy. This one was given to us because we know we're using the loan to value test. So the 75% that they gave us there is just 75%. That should be pretty straightforward. And then the last point is the break-even point. Remember, this is the minimum amount of vacancy necessary to make no money, just to have a straight break-even. So the way you figure out break-even point is you take your operating expenses plus your debt services divided by your gross income. So we know that our operating expenses are 120,000 from the facts of the case. Our debt service, 154,271. We just did a few slides ago. And remember, our gross income is 342,000. We take those numbers, we plug them in, 120,000 plus 154,271 divided by 342,000. We get 0.8019. Now we move the decimal point over 2 spots to create our percentage, and we find that our break-even point is 80%. This means the apartment needs at least 80% occupancy to cover the costs and debt service, i.e. just to break even. And that should be the end of question 1. Good job. We're ready to move on to question 2 then.